Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's program. During the course of this year, with COVID-19, teachers, parents and students have had to adapt quite quickly to a new way of learning in a remote setting. They've also had to transition in and back out of the classroom in between. For many, this experience has been enlightening, but has also been sometimes troublesome and difficult, depending on the age of the children and many other factors. So this evening we're talking to Dr. Elizabeth Rouse, who is the Senior Lecturer in Early Childhood Education from Deakin University. Dr. Elizabeth Rouse has worked in the field of education for over 30 years. She's taught in both early childhood settings as well as in schools. Additionally, she has also worked in special education settings, community-based family support programs, and as a policy advisor at both state and local government level. She has worked in initial teacher education since 2010. Dr. Rouse has developed a strong research profile in the area of family, school, community partnerships, which was the focus of her doctoral dissertation. Her publication, Partnerships in the Early Years, 2019 Oxford University Press, framed by her doctoral research, is now a prescribed text in a number of Australian universities as well as in Europe and North America. More recently, her research has focused on partnerships during transitions within and across education settings. Welcome this evening, Liz. Great to have you with us tonight, just answering a few questions that we have about remote learning and beyond as well. I'll would you like to say anything to begin with?
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for having me. And I know you've acknowledged the traditional custodians of the land, but I'd like to do that before we start and pay my respects to any elders, past and present. And it's been a really interesting space the last few months. And when I think about transition, and a lot of the work that I did last year or in the previous years has been focusing on children transitioning from early childhood settings to school. But when we think about transitions, the fact that children they've transitioned into school, then they transition to home learning, and then they transition back to school, and then they've transitioned to home learning, and hopefully they'll be transitioning back to school again. The number of transitions that these young children have gone through over the last few months has been extraordinary. So I also would like to sort of let our audience know I have an expertise in early years, so early primary school, early childhood. So if you've got children who are secondary school age children, some of what I'm going to be saying is possibly relevant to you, but specifically focusing on the needs of the adolescents and the young adults is something that I'm probably not going to be focusing on.
Yes, that's great. Well, yeah, I actually have teenage children, so I can't answer any questions, and I don't have any magic solutions either.
At least you're a parent, so you know what they're going through.
Yeah, it's been an interesting ride. So many people call remote learning homeschooling, but there's a big difference. Just to clarify before we begin, what are the main differences between homeschooling and remote learning? So I know that I read your article and you did mention that.
Yeah. Look, I think when children first started, when schools first were closing and children were going to be learning from home, there was a lot of conversations around parents are homeschooling their children, and that children are learning remotely. And I think that over the months we've come to understand that we're not homeschooling our children. The teachers are schooling our children who are learning from home, and they're learning remotely because they're using remote digital technologies to engage with the learning. So as parents, we're not teaching our children, we're not schooling our children, we're supporting the children to engage with the learning that the teachers are actually running. They're designing the programs, they're designing the activities, and they're engaging with the children. And as parents, we're playing an absolutely vital role in the background, supporting our children. We're the ones that when they wake up in the morning and burst into tears and say, I can't do this today, Mum, we're the ones that jump in and support them in that. When they're struggling with the technology or they're feeling a bit down or they're being distracted by what's happening, we're the ones there that are supporting them. So it's a real partnership, I think, with the schools in a different way than we've ever been able to do before.
Moving on to that, how do we keep our children focused? For example, what's the best way and position? How do we set that up? Obviously, people have been doing it for quite a few months now, but, you know, maybe successfully or perhaps with a bit of difficulty. What's the best way that you feel might be to set up the space for the remote learning in school, at home?
Yeah. Look, I think that there really is no best way, because people's circumstances are differently. Like if you're in my house at the moment, I've got all of my adult children living at home. I'm sitting on the couch because I've got nowhere else in the house to work. We don't have an office. I don't have a dedicated space. I get really jealous when I do meetings with my colleagues and they're in this lovely little office and I'm sitting there, sometimes even on my bed, having these meetings. So I think that trying to do what's the best is really quite challenging. But I think we need to be able to do what's best for our particular circumstances. So if the children do feel more comfortable sitting in bed with their iPads, then let them do that. And sitting around the dining room table, if that's going to work because everybody's doing that together, then setting it up that way. And I know when we first went into this space, it seems like such a long time ago, it was at the beginning of term 2, you know, I talked a lot about what was happening in our house is that we've got a very big dining room table because there's 6 of us, but we're all sitting at the dining room table at that particular time. I was working from home. My daughter was doing her uni work. My son was doing some from work for his organisation. So we're all sitting around the dining room table. And I think that's a lovely way of being connected with the school, because if all the family are sitting around, you know, the parents who are working, all the children are working together, we're bouncing ideas off each other, but we're also creating a sense that this is normal. We're all doing this. I'm not doing something that nobody else is doing, and we're all doing this together. And so it becomes much more of a normal practice than having a dedicated learning space. But for some other children, having a dedicated learning space is what's going to work for them. So it's about thinking about what works for you, for your child, for each of your children, because often, you know, different children want different things, and how are you going to manage that? Because we're also working from home, and the teachers that are teaching your children are working from home, and they've often got their own children that they're supporting while they're supporting your children. So there isn't a one size fits all. So I think it's finding a space that your child's comfortable in, that they feel that they can connect in, that they feel supported by, and they want to engage with.
And obviously with that family being all in the one space, sometimes it might be difficult. So I know one of my cousins mentioned that she has 5 children and one of them is a toddler. So they're sitting watching the Wiggles or whatever, you know, a DVD, and of course their siblings are saying, well, that's not fair. Why can't we go and watch that as well? That's probably one of the hardest things that I've heard. It's been difficult with the younger children, especially when there's lots of different age. So that distraction by other siblings who are perhaps a bit younger.
Yeah, and I think that's a reality for particularly out in the area that you live, where there's so many families with young children, that is a reality. And I think it's about giving ownership to the school children around taking some sort of ownership about their learning and negotiating with them, sort of saying, okay, Jeremy's using the iPad now because he's watching the Wiggles, so you can do your work. Let's do the work until the bell goes, or however the schools break the day up, and then you can have a turn to watch the Wiggles, and they can do something else, so that you're actually negotiating with the children, so that they don't feel that somebody's getting a special treat and that they're missing out. So, trying to set up a time. So, and some of the schools are doing very, very structured learning this time around, where all the children have to focus. And that's really, really draining, whereas other schools are doing much more asynchronous, where here's a list of tasks that you need to do, and you do them and you upload them. So different schools are doing different things. So again, it's difficult to say this is the one size fits all, because your school may be doing something that's a bit different. So talking to the children at the beginning of the day about, well, what is the expectation? What are the expectations? It's Wednesday today. So what are we going to do today? What are the expectations? Okay, while you're doing that, Jeremy can be playing the iPad, watching the iPad, the Wiggles on the iPad. And as soon as school's finished, you can have a turn on the iPad, or we'll do something so that they don't feel that they're missing out. But going through the structure of the day, I think is really important. And starting the day, and I know you're probably feeling the same as me. If I don't start the day and sort of say, right, it's 9 o'clock now, I'm going to start the day, I'm going to get a coffee, I'm going to sit at the table, and then 4 o'clock, all right, 4 o'clock, I've been here, I haven't taken a break, I'm going to finish the day. You need to have that differentiation of time, and I think children need that as well. So how do we set that up? We're going to work from 9. Normally at school the bell will go at 20 to 11 for morning play or whatever the time is. Then we're going to stop and we're going to turn all the devices off. I'll turn my device off, you'll turn your device off, we're going to go outside, we'll have a run around the backyard, we'll do some drawing, we'll play in the bedroom, we'll do something so that they can get that differentiation, so that they can get as much normality around a school day as possible.
Yes, I know that sometimes for some routine is really important to, as you said, just to get that. I know that with work, I'll get up, I have breakfast, I go and have a shower, I get dressed because that feels like I'm going to work. So I guess that for some, depending on the age of the children as well, that helps them get into that zone or that mindset. But yeah, it has to be very flexible. And you did mention balancing, as a parent, balancing your work and as well as, being able to support your children in their schooling. That's probably something that I think a lot of parents have found pretty difficult. And I guess, it's the expectations that they feel are put on them or they're putting on themselves as well, hoping to do the best they can. But yeah, I think it'd be great to be able to, balance it really well. And some parents probably find it a bit hard when they're working, but everybody's in the same boat, I guess.
And I think that's a really important thing, Maura, because I think we put the pressure on ourselves as parents to feel that we've got to do this and we've got to do this. And I'm expected, because I'm working, I'm expected to put in an 8-hour day or a 7.5-hour day. And when you think about a day in our lives as working parents, but also as children, how much of the day is used up by not doing work? Like if you go into the office or you go into the library, you'll catch up with people, you'll have a chat, you'll have a cup of coffee, you'll do a bit of photocopying, you'll have an idea and you'll go and talk to a colleague. Children in school are doing the same things. They start at 9 o'clock and I've been in classrooms and the first 10, 15 minutes of the day is, the notices, the tote box, the roll, the messages, it's a rainy day, so we might change around what we do. Children are getting up and moving around, and yet we have this new environment where we're expecting everybody to be sat glued to their computer or their Zoom, focusing on a set of tasks. And I think as parents, we have to also realise that our bosses, our workplace, everybody's in the same as us. And so I don't think anybody's expecting anybody to be putting that concentrated amount of work in, because we know I've got some colleagues who are trying to teach and have their own children at home as well. And so nobody's having that level of expectation. And so nobody's being held to account because they haven't achieved something because they were working and supporting their children. So I think we need to give ourselves permission to be able to deal with what we can deal with. And one day you might be dealing way more with a child because it's a particularly complex task that they're having to do. Other times they can go off and do stuff and you can get on with your work. Or you can, if you have a really important task that you have to achieve for work, well, then you can set the children up and say, I'm going to be doing this for this amount of time. You get on and do that and I will come and help you when I'm finished. So setting clear boundaries, but give yourself permission to only do what you can do and don't try to do more than you can do.
That's right. And I think parents are used to doing that in other aspects of their life with their kids anyway, when they have something that they have to do or they have a task they need to do, and being able to make sure that their child is occupied or while they can do that. So another question that comes from that that we had was the expectations of the teachers or educators. And the question is, how do we approach teachers who are, as you mentioned, that very strict in face-to-face catch-ups with the whole class, when the kids are very excited just to see each other and they might be acting a little bit silly? Should they allow more social time because the kids are craving that? They've missed out on that because different teachers seem to have a different take on how to approach the remote learning, and some use it to connect, to help the kids connect with each other, which is really great, and others use it as more formalised transmission style teaching.
Yeah.
So
Look, I think there's a lot of parameters here happening, because when we first did this the very first time around in term 2, teachers were very, very much focusing on the children's well-being, keeping the children social, making those connections and developing the relationships, because we didn't realise that this was going to go on for so long. And I think that was a really important focus. But now what's happening is that everybody's scared that these children are going to lose out. You know, that the schools are concerned about the children falling behind. Parents are concerned about their children falling behind. Teachers are concerned about children falling behind. How are we going to keep these kids engaged? And so the pressures around learning this time round are much stronger, because we've lost basically half a year.
Yeah.
And people are really concerned about that. And so they're making decisions with that in mind, because they don't want children to lose any more. And I think that as a parent, I think recognising that you and the teacher both have the same goal and the same concern, that children are going to be able to achieve and catch up as much as they can and not lose any more than they've had to, and as parents and teachers, we've all got that same concern. So I think that's what's driving what's happening at the moment. But I think the social stuff is really, really important, and I think the teachers are very aware that the children, I mean, if you're trying to run a Zoom session or a Microsoft Teams meeting with 22 5-year-olds who are all jumping through the hoops, as a teacher, you know that. You know what's going on. So I think the teachers are aware of that. And so when they're taking those classes, they're not critical of children who are, jumping around and doing all these things. They know the children are doing this because they're excited. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think teachers also are recognising that there are some days when the children just can't be bothered. I wake up myself sometimes and I'm just not feeling it today. We have an I'm not feeling it today day. We have that, and the children have that. So I think teachers are aware of that too. And I think as parents, we need to give them permission to have a I'm not feeling it today day. And so I think recognising that you and the teachers, the parents and the teachers really are on the same page, because we both have the same level of concern, is really important. But children are very resilient. They make those connections themselves. And I think the social stuff is really important. And I know we've got school holidays coming up. And I think that's going to be a really important time for parents to close all the school books off, not worry about anything to do with schooling over the 2 weeks of the school holidays, and allow the children, hopefully by the time we get to the school holidays, we will be out of stage 4. We will be able to perhaps have connections with some of those, so that set up some play dates in the park where we can social distance, 2 or 3 parents with 2 or 3 of the children, where they can be kicking the ball, having a picnic, socially distancing, to re-establish those connections is really important. And I know when we were talking, earlier in the week, as adults, we set up all sorts of social opportunities. We'll have Zoom meetings and, virtual cups of coffee with our friends and catch up. But we don't necessarily do the same thing for our children, because we're concerned about the amount of time they're connecting with the technology.
Yeah, the screens.
But I think we've also got to try and balance the amount of time children are connecting with technology in this very short period of time, with maintaining and creating opportunities for social engagement, and looking at the amount of screen time children are doing. Children will get to the stage where they don't want to. You're tired, you're exhausted. But thinking about how you can even set up Zoom meetings where the children can sit down and have virtual Lego.
Yes.
Or virtual cooking, that they can be doing some virtual cooking together, making cupcakes or some things like that, so that they're not actually looking at the screen, but they're engaging with each other using the screens is really important.
I can hear all the youth librarians' brains ticking over if they're watching this about different programs on Lego, getting together with Lego and things like that. I'm sure they'd love that as well. Definitely, we're obviously optimistic that we're going to be able to catch up, and the weather's getting better, and getting that social connection is really important. Another question, which you sort of touched on before, do you think that the education gap for children would be even bigger given that the varying abilities for parents to support their children? So the support they're getting at home, depending on, I think I might have mentioned that later on, there's different levels of literacy, or for the parent being the support person, sometimes that can be hard. And how can the school and teachers give the best support or enough support when that's needed?
Yeah, and I think that that there are, we do have to acknowledge that people have different capacities or capabilities in engaging with their children, and I think it's recognising as a parent, we know children learn so much in so many different ways, and so they may be not necessarily learning the academic skills that the teacher has set, because you may not be able to help them. But what are you doing at home with your child? As a parent at home, what we're doing with our children is looking after their well-being, building up their resilience, building up their capacity to take risks, problem solve, take a chance, try something new, deal with failure. Those are the sorts of skills. When we talk in the school curriculum, we have the academic learning, the literacy, the numeracy, the all of those sorts of things. But we also have what we call the general capabilities, and the general capabilities are those things around being able to solve problems, being able to act ethically towards other people, being able to understand and develop a sense of who you are as a person, and how you connect with the community and the world around you. So there's some really important skills that as parents we are supporting our children, whether we speak English as a second or a third language, whether we don't have access to technology. I know that your library delivers books to children at home. You've got a great home delivery system. So just being able to borrow a book, even if it's in your home language, and reading it with the children, having that lovely time together, listening to the children when they're telling you how they're feeling, creating opportunities for the children to share the good things that's happening to them, but also the things that they're challenged by. That's creating a whole set of learning and skills for children that is really, really important, and in many ways is as important as the academic learning. And I think every child in Victoria has been in the same position as your child has been, so that your child's not going to be any better or worse off than any other child. It's not that your child's been at home and there's been a class of 30 children still going into school. Every child has been affected in the same way. So I think schools are very much aware of looking at where children are at and how they can then support them individually over the next 18 months to try to get back on track. So don't worry too much about the academic learning. Think about the role that you have as a parent to support those general capabilities that are really important, because they're the ones that set you up for life.
That's right.
You could learn a new skill, but you can't necessarily learn a new skill if you don't have the confidence to give it a try.
And also there's so much incidental learning to be had in the home and around the home as well, with things like, cooking together and gardening and
Yeah,
things like that, where kids
yeah,
are learning all the time, and it's not so much that formal
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
structure.
yeah. Even
I
things like
did,
making a list. We've got to go shopping. We've got the 1 hour on the one desert. What are the
yeah,
things that I need to buy? Let's make a list of all the things that we need, or let's make a list. So, thinking about let's write a letter to grandma that we can send over to grandma in Lebanon, or whatever, so that they're doing those incidental things that are still important, but may not be necessarily what the curriculum is, but you can support them that way, and then they'll have the confidence to take on some of the other challenges that academically they're dealing with.
yeah. Okay, I'll just go to my next question. There's quite a few that I've skipped over. Will the curriculum be modified for the remainder of this year and next year to ensure kids can catch up? Well, I think you've already kind of covered that, really, about not, things are quite flexible and not putting the pressure on.
Yeah, and the curriculum looks at outcomes rather than outputs. So it says by the time children finish at this level, they should be able to know and understand. And so it's about thinking about, well, how do we support them to get there, rather than looking at specific tasks or activities or sets of skills. It's about, well, we've got another period of time to get them there. So that I think that the curriculum foundation has a curriculum year level of its own, but the others, so there's they're in chunks, so that they sort of say, well, we've got time to be able to nurture these children and see where this child's at and how I can progress them forward, to move them on. So I don't know that they'll modify the curriculum so much, but I think they'll modify the way they look at what the learning outcomes that they want for children will be, and how they're going to address them.
Yep. Okay. Jan asks, have you observed any differences in engagement or achievement for those learning from home and those who are at a school and still online for the class?
I haven't personally, because I haven't been in schools at this particular time, but talking to teachers, I think that the children who are in, I think that both sets of children have had successes and both sets of children have had difficulties. And for some children who are at home, this has been a really great opportunity for them, because children who are easily distracted in class or aren't confident in class, who can then work on their own or have a one-on-one session with their teacher, sometimes are achieving better than children who when they're in the class. Some of the children who are on campus working, they've had some great opportunities to work one-on-one with teachers because they've had very small groups. So they've had some really great opportunities to catch up and have some of the challenges, work with a teacher to deal with some of their challenges. But then also they've had other challenges because they've been there. Often there's sort of 3 or 4 teachers and very few children. They're not connecting with their friends. They're not necessarily with a teacher who knows them. So both groups of children have had successes and both groups of children have had challenges.
Yes, I know that in your article you do mention that some children actually they've been able to shine a little bit more because they get more one-on-one time, and they are able to have more opportunities to speak to their teacher. And it's interesting, even between siblings in my house, there's been a big difference to how they've been going with their remote learning. And I know that even though mine are teenagers, my son, all of his work is done. Whereas when he's at school, it's actually quite difficult. Whereas my daughter in Year 7, she did not enjoy remote learning in the beginning because it was a social thing, and she just started. So for kids in primary school, especially at either end, so your preps and then your grade 6s, at one stage they've just started, and as you said, they're so young, they're not really used to school at all. And then you've got your grade 6s who are in their last year of primary school, and it's a very different experience for all of them.
And I really feel for those grade 6 children, because all they've ever wanted to do since they started prep was to be a grade 6, and they're this, and all the things that being the grade 6 meant, that you look up to, and the grade 6 year they've had is not the year that they envisaged. The school captain or the sports captain of what, the grade 6 school camps and all of those things that children have missed out on, I think have really in some ways been much more disheartening for children than not being at school and learning. I think it's the social and the extracurricular stuff that that they haven't done, and they've also not been able to do OSCE or netball or sport, soccer, or all of those things that you do on weekends, and that you connect with your peers. And I think that is compounding what's actually happening. And I think for sometimes it's the learning is a bit of normality. It is something that we can focus on. It is something that we can do, because the days are very, very long and very, very boring. So at least when I've got schoolwork to do, it is something I've got to do that I can focus on.
Do you see any gaps in the curriculum as far as meaningful opportunities for children to practice mindfulness or support their emotional well-being? Do you think this should be considered?
Yeah, look, I think the first time round it was. I think this time round it probably hasn't been such a strong focus, because there's much more nervousness around helping children achieve. But I think that's something as parents that we can be really working, and that's where we talk a lot about partnerships between teachers and parents. And I think this way, this is a time when we're really complementing each other. The teachers are focusing on one aspect of children's learning, and as parents we can be focusing on the others, so that the gaps around mindfulness and well-being and resilience and all of those things that are really important, I think we can be supporting them at home. We can be saying, well, I know you're struggling. I know you're finding that really hard to understand what Miss Smith is asking you to do. Let's stop. How do you think? What do you think she might mean? How do you think you could find out? So doing those sorts of things with children, so that you're giving them the strategies to help them problem solve rather than solving it for them, is that sense of making sense of that stuff, but also giving them time to just be. The day is really busy. You start at 9 o'clock, and some schools I've been hearing about that the children are basically on a computer for 6 hours, which is just awful. So letting children just be is really, really important. How do you create a space in the child's day for them to just be? In a classroom, the teacher might just do some yoga after lunch, or for the little preppies, she might just have them, lying down on the floor, closing their eyes, and some meditation music. And that would be a common practice in a prep classroom or a grade 3 classroom after lunch. In many schools, how can we put those things into play where we can turn off all the lights, turn off all the computers, put some soft, soothing music on, and just let the children be? Is something that we can be doing at home before we then start the busyness of the next set of tasks.
Yeah, I think that with the next question, what you're just saying kind of answers that a little bit, which is what's the best strategy for helping children to understand that the learning they are doing now are building blocks for the work they will do when they get back to school. Do they really need to be worrying or concerned that much about, especially at that age as a primary school child, what I'm learning now is going to be that's going to help me when I go back to school. When you're helping children to learn to just be, do you need to put that kind of pressure on them, or is it a really good idea to say, oh, look, you're learning this today, and when you go back to school, that's going to help you with, the next bit. So I'm not sure how you see that.
I wouldn't be putting the pressure on them unless they were concerned about it.
Yeah.
So if the children are asking the question about why am I doing this, what's this got to do with anything, then you can have the conversation with them and sort of, and talk to them. And I think one of the things that we owe children, and as we owe ourselves, is the sense of being honest. Is that we need to be honest with the children, say, I'm really concerned that you're having a really, really busy day. I'm really concerned that you're spending all of your time doing all this work on the computer. I'm really concerned that you're getting very tired. So the I words, I think, are really important. And I want you to feel relaxed. I want you to feel happy. Those are the sorts of things. And the child will say, yes, you're right, Mum. You know what? I wasn't happy yesterday. And I think that's opened the door to say, yes, I didn't think you had. Tell me why you weren't happy, so that you can open the door to have those conversations by using that sort of language. And I think, and if you were at school and and if the children say, I'm not happy because I'm not worried about when I go back to school that I'm not going to be as good as somebody else. That opens the door for them to share their concerns. And then instead of solving the problems for them, because we can't, then you can say, well, if you do feel that you're not as good as the rest of the class, what do you think you could do?
Putting it back in their court.
And if they sort of say, well, do you think you could perhaps tell Mrs. Smith how you're feeling? So giving them some strategies rather than solving it for them, because they want the honesty. They may go back to class, and they're probably going to go back and they're going to be fine. But they don't need reassurance. They need strategies, and they need practical understanding about that, and they need honesty.
Yeah, I know that you also mentioned in your article that if you don't pick a topic and sit them down and talk about it, how are you going with this or how are you going with that? That approach where you're having that conversation and they are being honest and able to be honest, and then you help them with the strategies, is a better way than sort of tackling it in a more formal way.
Yeah. And I think creating a context in the family where everybody gets to, we have a thing at our house, and I said we're all adults, so there's 6 of us in the house, but what we've done every night since the very first lockdown is we'll sit around the dinner table and we'll sort of say, the best thing that happened to me today was... And so we always sing, and it could be just, my husband gave me a cup of coffee in bed this morning, or I went for a walk in the sunshine, or the cat was being really silly. Or it could be something really nice, like, I had a chance to talk to, my friend on Zoom today, and that made me feel happy. So there's always something in a day that can make you feel good. And I think if you can start the day, and everybody does that, then you can sort of open the door to sort of say, well, what are some of the things that might be concerning, can then come out of that. But you don't need to start the day, well, what did you learn today? What did you do today? Or what happened today? Or what did you learn about this? They don't want to know. They don't want to share. They don't want to talk any more than they did when they were in class. When you pick kids up at the playground at the end of the day, what did you learn today? Nothing.
Yeah.
So they're not going to want to tell you any more, because you know what they've learned. You were there. You saw.
That's right.
But it's about how you're feeling. What was a good thing? What was the best thing that happened to you today?
Yeah.
And it could be about schoolwork. It could be that they saw a fly crawling up the wall. It could be something really obscure. But they're getting a chance to celebrate just being, and taking their mind off the pressures of having to demonstrate what they know.
I'm finding one question I really wanted to ask you as a former primary teacher myself is how are you conveying to your students at this time, how is the course for them at the moment, and how you're approaching this kind of learning and in an academic way as a way to prepare them?
You mean our student teachers?
Your student teachers, yes.
Look, it's been a really, really interesting time, because they've all of our student teachers have had their student placements totally thrown into chaos and upheaval over this time. And so what we've been talking to them about is not what they've missed out on, but what have they gained from this? And so shifting it, sort of saying, yes, I know it's not the placement you expected. I know you didn't get time in the classroom, but what did you get? What have you learned from this? So again, it's that sort of sense that as a teacher, as a student teacher, the cohort of students that we have now coming through, who are going to be the next generation of teachers, they're going to go out next year or the year after, and they're going to be the teachers in these schools. They are going to be so much more capable and resilient, because they've had to learn in a very, very fractured and distracting way. They've had to deal with their own identity development as a teacher in a way that has been so disjointed. They haven't had those connections, and they've had to think very much differently about students and the relationships they create with students. And one of the hardest thing, but the most rewarding thing for our students that they talk about is how they've managed to create relationships with children as a student teacher that they don't even know, using remote tools, and they've found that most rewarding. And the other thing that they've found most rewarding is the connection they've made with the teachers, not just the teacher who would have been their classroom teacher that they were working with, but the teachers in the schools, because it's this collaborative understanding of we've got to try and make this work, and if I've got an idea, I'll share it with you. And so that sense of collaboration, but what the students are telling us is that they've learned so much more about children. They've learned so much more around how children learn, the context that children are bringing into the classroom that you didn't really get to know and understand before because you didn't have that close connection with children. So they've had a much different learning that I think that they're finding really, really valuable, let alone how to do this teaching. If we ever have to go into this again, this generation of teachers are going to be so competent to be able to continue the learning for children that has been really, really marvellous.
And that leads into one of my final questions. What are the benefits of this period of time in remote learning for the students and the parents as well as the teachers? Because I know that you did mention something. I'll let you explain about what you see the benefits are rather than telling everybody, and rather coming from you. How do you see this experience that we've all had as parents and students and teachers as a benefit?
Oh, look, I think once we get over this, we will see the great benefits. There's so many benefits. I think the benefits for the children are how they see themselves as learners, when they've sort of separate, when they realise how resilient they were, how adaptable they were, how capable they were, I think is really great. You know, that the children have developed a sense of capabilities and aptitudes and resilience through all of this that I think has really was never, I mean, we always knew it, but I think we've really seen it. So that being able to see how children can do this and can adapt and just take what the world throws at them and keep going has been really marvellous. I think the benefits for parents has been that they've been able to get a real insight into seeing their child as a learner. And as parents, we've never seen that before. You know, we take our children, we either drive them, drop them at the drop-off, walk them to the gate. We pick them up at the end of the day, tell me what you learned. I didn't learn anything today, Mum, but I played great. So we don't know. We don't see them learning, and we don't know how they learn, and we don't really know what they're learning because we've been so heavily invested and present in the learning. We've got a real sense of who our children are, how they learn, and seeing them differently, but also what they're learning, and being able to get a greater understanding of what the learning is in the schools. But we've also had a greater understanding for what the teachers are doing, and how teachers teach, and the partnership that has been able to be created between parents and teachers, because teachers can't do this without parents, and parents can't do this without teachers. And I think that understanding has become much stronger than it ever was before, because the parents know what the teachers are doing to create the learning so that the children can learn, and they're in the background helping them. But the teachers know that if they don't have the parents at home supporting them, then the children aren't necessarily going to be able to connect either. And so while it might be really frustrating, and as a parent sometimes thinking, I just wish this teacher would let my child be, which, you know, and the teacher saying, wish that parent would let that child alone. I think that it's that sense of really developing that strong partnership and understanding around what it is that teachers do. The teachers have been amazing. The way, you know, they haven't always done what necessarily everybody else would think. You know, that if I talk to 10 teachers, each of them will be doing something differently. I'm thinking, oh, I wouldn't have done that. But that doesn't mean it's not right. The teachers are doing a fantastic job within a system that has been created for them. And I think parents are very appreciative of that, but also seeing how that works. I think some of the benefits for teachers is that they've been parents working from home with their own children while they're trying to teach a class of children. So they've developed a really strong understanding of what's happening for parents and happening in parents' lives, which they probably wouldn't necessarily have had before because they're very focused on the learner in the classroom. So that sense
of removed. It's somewhat removed.
Creating, I think, and so I think there's been some fantastic benefits, as well as the use of technology and how technology can really be used differently in the learning space.
And a lot of teachers they've continued, some have and some haven't, with their interviews via Zoom and over the phone, I believe, as well. That was another question that we had. The article that I was mentioning is actually called Navigating the New Normal for Back to School Starts at Home. And it's a short article, but we've covered a lot of what you've said in there. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we finish for this evening, Liz?
Look, I just want to go back to parents and just give them permission to do your best. And your best is your best. And I remember I did a session with some educators out in the northern suburbs, and your best is your best. You can only do your best. You can't do any more than your best. Best is the superlative. There's no word better than best. And I think some days best might be like this, and some days best might be like that. But it's always the best. So give yourself permission to just do your best, and don't expect yourself to do any more than that, because I think if you're feeling that you are doing what you can do in the circumstances that you have, and as I said, some days is a day I'm not feeling it today, you can, if you're feeling confident and comfortable and relaxed about what you're doing, then your children will be confident and capable and relaxed. But if you're feeling stressed because you don't feel that you're doing enough, although you're doing more than enough, then that's going to impact upon the way the children connect. So give yourself permission to do your best and not think that you've got to do any more than that, because we're all in this. I'm sick of that saying we're all in this together, but we are, and you know, everybody's circumstances are different, and the way people are dealing with the stresses that they've been faced are different. Because people are different. And so don't feel badly that you're not doing as much as somebody else because you're doing what you're doing and that's the best you can do. The children are resilient. They will struggle on, but they won't be resilient if you're not there, if you're not resilient and you fall in a heap. So I think that's really important.
It is. And also the practices that we're all learning at the moment, what do you see as any of those practices coming through into the new normal, whatever that may be, that we will keep? Do you see any things that will change in a really positive way when we do go back to a classroom situation that has come out of this?
I think what will change back in the classroom situations, I think there'll be I think teachers will be able to think in a much greater way about the child and what the child's bringing into the classroom, because they've seen how they've worked from home and they've seen some of the challenges that they've had at home. And so seeing that child as an individual, I think, will really change. I think thinking about how we teach, some of the teaching approaches that we use, because we've had to be much more adaptable and think differently about teaching. I think some of those approaches will change. I don't think we'll go back to the same classroom. And I think what the importance of the social connections is really important. And I was actually talking to some schools the other day, thinking about how we structure our grades for next year. Are we going, so that we can build and continue to focus on those social connections is going to be really important moving forward too. So I think schools will be really sitting back once they've got over this, and teachers are exhausted. They are parents are exhausted. teachers are exhausted. That, we talk a lot about teachers having short days and long holidays. Well, the teachers haven't had a holiday since January. They've worked right through both those school holidays, working really hard and prepare, and the anxieties that they have around these children has been really stressful. So the teachers are exhausted. And so I think once they've had a chance, this term I think is going to be a term, if we go back into the classroom, and fingers crossed that we are, I think it'll be a much more relaxed term, hopefully, because teachers are exhausted and children are exhausted. So, but I think once we get into next year and we've had a chance to take a breath, I think the learnings that will come out of this will really be shaping classrooms differently next year.
Well, that's a really great way to finish off, Liz. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you very much for being with us this evening. And I hope that everybody, I'm sure that everybody has got a lot out of tonight's program. And thank you again.
Well, thank you, and it's been and good luck to all the parents out there, and hopefully the weather will be beautiful. I love the Cranbourne botanical gardens down there. Take your children out during the school holidays with some friends and just run around that beautiful garden. Get some lovely nature into and sunshine, and I think the world will be a much happier place if you can do that.
Thank you again.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.